All right, good evening. The time being 7 PM, December 16th, 2019. A quorum of the planning board being present, I call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda are the approval of minutes. I've been asked that we table the minutes for the November 18th and November 20th meeting until our next meeting. We have a full board to vote on them. So do I have a motion to table these till the next meeting?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Bringing us to agenda item B, committee reports, administrative action. Do any of the members have any committee reports that they wish to make?
No, all set. Not at this time.
All right. I guess the only committee report, would be that the joint meeting between the planning board and the bylaw subcommittee that was going to happen on Wednesday has been postponed until after the new year. So if anybody was planning on attending, that's been postponed. I think
6th.
6th. I don't know if that was set in stone, but that's the date that I got. So, okay. All right, so that moves us to bond release, 395 Woburn Street. Is there anything new on 395 Woburn Street?
Nope, you have everything.
Okay, so I believe.
Well, I mean, you have in the packet, your packet, so, let's see what Alex gave you. Yeah, you have had it from November 22nd. Actually, this was.
So nothing's changed since
It's
we
been
were
approved.
holding? Oh, it's okay, all right, so then, how much is the bond?
I believe it's 20,000.
Okay. All right, so if we're all set with that, take a motion to release the bond for 395 Woburn Street.
So moved.
All right, a motion made, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Modification to planning board application and fees. We left this the last time. What was the final of it, you know?
Yeah, nothing changed. I'm just here to answer questions about it, so let me just pull it up real quick.
Okay, Mr. Ryder, do you have any?
Yeah, I briefly reviewed them. What are we looking to address? I think there's a lot here, so
Okay.
how intensive we're going to get with these? That was my confusion on.
I just want to explain, Chair. So the fees, those are what we have been doing. That's just putting them on, clarifying on the application, the fee schedule. And then the actual fee application, that's just inserting some extra information for the applicant to enter. Most of it can be answered. Some things such as the family suite obviously will not be applicable. But nothing's really changing. We're just clarifying the fee schedule that's already in place. We don't do that calculation. That paragraph that you guys see there, we never use that. So nothing's really changing. Those are the amounts that we've been using.
Okay.
But I did include the surrounding towns' fee schedules so that you guys could look at those. And,
Okay, I guess that was my question. Are we looking to address our current fees to bring them up with surrounding communities, or that was just for our reference?
Yeah, because I know Mr. Fratalia had requested at the November 18th meeting, just for your reference, so I included it in the packet. But we're not looking at, this isn't a change, it's just what we currently have for application fees. And it's just making it more user-friendly for the public, I guess.
Mr. Vitalia?
Yeah, so I guess my question is, who sets the fees for this? I guess that was one of my first questions. Is it the selectmen or is it us?
Would be the planning board.
Planning board?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not trying to reinvent our fee schedule or structure, but I did want to get a feel for what the other towns did in some type of relative comparison. So, and that spreadsheet would have been great if we could maybe do something like that. I'm not sure, if that's something we could do, or it's too much of an effort, but, if we're too low, then I'd like to maybe bring them up to surrounding towns. If we're too high, then maybe we can adjust them somehow, some way, but I did wanted to get some type of analysis. I did read some of the surrounding towns, and I did see something in there for Billerica's fees. And there was a subdivision waiver fee, $125 per waiver. I don't know if we do that or not, I'm not quite sure, but there was a number of other ones. There was a fee there for Wilmington, had a fee for relief from parking fee. You know, Andover had a similar fee. I don't know if we do that, but if we could do something similar to that, so we're not too high or not too low. If we're too low, then maybe we raise them up a little bit, bring more revenue into the town for the residents of Tewksbury. If we're too high in some fashions, we had a little discussion earlier tonight about the family suite fee. I mean, that's a $500 fee that we charge. So,
550.
550, so I thought that was a little high, you know, so I don't know if that's something maybe we bring down, but, you know, again, I don't want to try to make us too much work for us, our staff, yourself included, but maybe a spreadsheet of some of the major fees that we charge rather than all of them, so, but before we set it again, so that's just my opinion, so 105, so.
So my question is, we can change these at any time.
Yeah, so this is administrative.
Right.
It's basically formatting it, because we're not actually changing the fees here. This is what we already do. And then this is just inserting additional requirements such as an email address, or it's a family suite asking for dimensional requirements, so that's clearer. So we were hoping to get this administrative item done for 2020, so we have a clean application going into the new year.
So, I mean, I guess at this point, I would think we'd be fine with leaving it the way it is, but I think, to Mr. Vitale's point, or at least for my purposes, I'd like to know what yourself, and maybe you want to discuss it with Mr. Sadwick as well, what you guys think, if you think some of these ones like Vinnie just brought up, whether we should add those, what's your recommendation on some of those, in terms of, you know, if the general consensus is that, you know, waiver requests require, you know, in other places, and you think that's something we should incorporate, let us know. And then we can see about potentially adding that to the fee schedule. But I'd rather hear from you guys on that rather than us making them up, you know, on the fly, just because, and I'm not saying this is the case, Vinnie, but just you happen to notice it someplace, they may be the only ones who do it. I have no idea.
You know, Stephen, it's so immense and so much information that I'm not very, familiar with.
Right.
All the fees. I mean, it's like,
And that's what I mean, but if there are some that are sort of become more standard elsewhere, and we're not using them, then we probably should. If anything we have has become sort of obsolete, or, like Vinnie said, we're a little on the high end, then we'll look at it, but I'd rather see the recommendations come from you guys that, you know, you feel like, hey, these are some for reasons X, Y, Z, whether it's just simply to be consistent with most other cities and towns, or as a sort of a, not a deterrent, but a reminder of, if you're talking about like the waiver fees, that, you know, just ask for the ones you really want, because, you know, it's kind of a la carte, and you're gonna be paying for them, so. If we get to that point, like I said, I don't know.
So I guess what we're looking for is a vote just to update this administrative items, because it's really, in terms of the fee schedule, it's not a change, to be clear. And then on the actual the application, it's just additional guidance for us and at the office side to review the application. So
At this point, I guess we'd entertain a motion to approve it as submitted to the board presently.
Yes, and then obviously we'll address it once we are able to get that comparison. So if something needs to be changed, we can.
yeah, I just don't want to be too high, but I don't want to be too low. I mean, again, it's, if we can save some people some money, great. If we're not charging enough for some of the fees that other towns are. I like the idea of the 5 towns you've given us, Andover, Billerica. Again, it's a lot of information to go through, and I'm not that clear on some of the other fees and all that stuff. So if we can do some type of, you know, just some of the major issues that we charge on a regular basis, that's all, so.
Yeah, yeah, we can
And, you know,
certainly do that.
I'd make the motion to approve what we have in place now. Maybe we could review it in the next couple of months, and maybe you guys, or sooner, or whatever, and then, there's no waiting period to adjust our fees, right? We can just do them,
Yeah, I believe we can just, it goes into effect once it's approved,
okay,
so.
right.
Okay. So then, do I have a
Second.
motion? All right.
I have a motion to
Okay,
approve
motion
as
made
is.
and seconded.
Second,
All those in
please.
favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. That takes care of that. That brings us to agenda item B4, non-substantial change, 464, 468 Main Street.
Yeah, do you want me to
Okay,
sign it?
if you don't mind. Well, while the gentleman is getting set up, just for everybody's information, maybe if anyone's at home wondering if any of the hearings that were previously scheduled were going to be heard tonight, our agenda items C, D, E, and F, which quickly are 120 Lumber Lane, 1037 North Street et al., Burt Road Development, and the 135 Pleasant Street. All four of those hearings will be postponed to our next meeting. Yes, all of them to the 13th. So nothing will be discussed on those this evening. And we'll pick up with those again on the 13th in the new year. All right, if you state your name for the record, the floor will be yours.
Sean Torpy, engineer for the project.
Bring the mic over because it's got to pick it up for the recording. Thank you.
Sean Torpy, engineer for the project. So I'm here in front of you tonight to request non-substantial changes for two items on site. The one item is some landscaping adjustments that we would like to make. And then the second item is a request to install a 40 by 30 foot temporary tent to assist with the operation of the dealership during construction. We submitted a markup, and I'm going to start with the markup for some of the landscaping changes that we're looking to make. The site as it exists, there's some proposed landscaping in the back of the site that is in an area that is currently stabilized, planted, and has wetlands vegetation in that area, because it does tend to get a little wet back in there at times. This area, if we were to go in and plant these trees, we would actually cause additional disturbance and potentially, when you make the disturbance in those types of areas, it's difficult for the plants to get back and to be vibrant. We had conversations with the Conservation Commission. We proposed some of these items to Stefania. She had no issues with our proposed changes, but she had said that the planting plan was approved by your group and that I should come to you to review the items that we have here today. So as part of the plan that we had submitted with the landscaping changes, we're proposing to remove these proposed plantings as it's already stabilized back here. Directly adjacent to this is the railroad, and then behind it is the heavy industrial uses. So from an aesthetic standpoint, a lot of this landscaping isn't really going to be visible to anyone other than people that may be working at the facility, just because the way that there's the auto body shop is here on Main Street. The storage facility is located to the east on Main Street, and then like I'd stated prior, on the other side of the train tracks are heavy industrial uses. The other item that we did is there's some landscaping here, and as we came in and started to do some of the installation, some of the landscaping with some of the minor changes and tweaks to the grading, we're just proposing to move the plants to different locations that are disturbed. Some of the locations that we show now do not have disturbance, and I think the planting plan was done and then finalized, and then the grading was additionally massaged through other revisions before the final approval. This planting plan didn't have revisions to it, so I think that maybe the landscaping was kind of missed. So right now, we're just trying to make some adjustments to these plantings. We're not proposing to not plant them, we're just looking to push them further to the front of the site where the disturbance is. On this side, the drop-off is pretty steep. There's existing slopes that we're not touching, and it would be really difficult to have any kind of a plant species be able to take roots and, you know, thrive in that bank. So from the, you know, middle half of the site towards the front, we're just looking to make some adjustments to the plantings to make sure that they have a chance to survive. And then down here in this bottom corner, we had proposed 3 plantings, and the thought was, you know, 4 years ago when we looked at this, we thought that the trees that were there they looked like they were having some health issues, so we thought we would just propose some new ones. They've recently taken, and they're doing a pretty good job. So the landscape architect suggested that we do not plant these 3 as there are some existing in place now. And that's essentially what this markup is. It illustrates areas where we're hoping to not plant and areas where we're going to make adjustments to the locations.
Okay. Before we move on to the tent, why don't we deal with the landscaping stuff first? Start with Mr. Fattalia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with that being said, are you taking away plantings, or actually you are not adding, correct?
Correct. We're looking to not plant in this back area of the
Right.
facility. And these 3 plants, we're also not looking to plant because of existing vegetation that came back and is thriving.
Okay. So the plants that you're not going to take, will they cause any sightline problems? Because that's coming in and out, right?
So we're not proposing to do any change, you're saying the existing.
Yes.
I can double check that. We would not allow it to have a sightline issue. I can
We
make sure.
wouldn't allow it either, so just so
No,
you
no,
know.
no.
So, but,
Understood.
okay. So now I have another question. The wall that's been taken out during construction, that is going back, yes or no?
Which wall?
The front wall on Main Street? The brick wall that's been there, the stone wall that's been there?
At the Pike House?
Yes.
Directly in front of the Pike House?
Yeah?
Yeah, that's getting taken out and that's going to be landscaped.
So the whole wall's coming out?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, this location here.
Okay, yeah. All right, I don't have any problems with your potential design here, but just be mindful of the fact that if there's issues with the landscaping, we can call you guys back in for us to review the landscaping if there's something deficient and so forth and so on.
Absolutely.
But other than that, I'm all set with that, so no problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ryder.
Thank you. So the trees you're intending to leave are next to the flagpole? Is that staying, the existing flagpole that was there in the corner? Is that front corner, left corner of your driveway?
Where the clump at 3 is being.
Yeah, the clump of 3 that you're continuing,
Far left, yeah.
that's just off that corner.
I'm trying to look at the site plan, because I don't know the answer off the top of my head, so I wanted to make sure that it shows it still to remain. I do not have an answer right this moment as to what is happening with the flagpole, but I can get an answer for you. I'd have to take a look at some of the previous, I wasn't involved with the original testimony, with the original approvals. I do know that the project is following the approvals from, the special permit, so whatever was approved is what is intended to be constructed.
Okay. I mean, I don't necessarily have any problem with the back landscaping being moved, but on the right side of the property, on the slope that abuts the storage facility, I'm just concerned with, you're just going to shift everything down. As Mr. Fattalia stated, that, if there is a void in that area, potentially may come back, or look at using some of that landscaping that you're removing in the back section and extend that section of landscaping along that area for sightline. Basically closing off that area between, on the right-hand side, yes.
So when I walked this, I noticed that from the curve, the existing slope drops off pretty quickly into a just area, and this area is existing vegetation. If it's feasible, we will do it, but the reason why we're shifting it down is because we realize that we're not disturbing this area, and that it would be really difficult to plant this vegetation, you know, where the slope is so steep to go down. And we're trying not to impact that existing, you know, drainage swale area.
Yeah, that is a swale that carries all the way back to the, behind the train
Right.
tracks.
So our feeling was, if we can disturb or not disturb is really what we're
Okay.
trying to do. We're trying to force these plantings to the areas that we are grading and we are doing the massaging, because then we can get it to a 3-to-1, which will allow some of these. But we can, and definitely evaluate, and I mean, they're gonna be open to, you know, the inspections when they come out to take a look, and if there's some things that we should do additionally,
Okay.
we can work through that.
Other than that, I'm all set. Thank you.
So, let's see how I say this. Did something happen since the time that this plan was developed and turned into us when the project was presented, that has suddenly had all these things happen that make these plantings unable to be done where they're supposed to, where they were gonna be done? Did something happen in the meantime? Something move, the earth shift? I don't understand. Was the plan actually looked at before it was handed to us the first time? Because the swale didn't come out of no place. The wetlands or whatever it is you have here in the back, or the what you don't want to disturb, was there before. Other than the trees becoming more healthy than you thought they were going to be, I'm confused as to why we were given a plan that apparently was not able to be done, only to have it brought back in to amend it and make it a non-substantial change and move things around. I'm just curious what's happened in the meantime that was different than the site existed when
Right.
this was handed to us.
I cannot speak to what happened in the past. I've only been working on this project for about a year. I know that they worked through the construction. I know that, you know, they were getting a lot of the infrastructure completed. And then as they looked at their next focus, it arose that putting these in wouldn't be beneficial. I think what happened in the very, very, very beginning, when the project was still, before it was approved, before it was permitted, was they had this area disturbed with grading using 3-to-1 slopes. And what ended up happening through the revisions was they ended up deciding to go with a retaining wall here, so they did not encroach into these areas. So when the planting plan was done, the grading was changed, a retaining wall was put in so that there's not as much disturbance going back towards the tracks, but the landscaping was never updated to address those changes.
All right. So, okay. I'm not going to have a problem if we take that out for now, but it would be my suggestion that we retain the right to request that those things be put back in the back, for one. Two, if they're being removed there, and we decide we want them on the side, Mr. Ryder pointed out, that we may request more landscaping, whether it's that or something else that can be put there that won't cause a problem. I want us to retain the right to ask for that. My other suggestion is on the trees, just in case they don't continue to stay healthy, the ones that are there that, you know, you don't want to add to, in the event that at some point those begin to have some problem or anything else, I want to retain that those corner trees could be required to be planted in the future to account for any loss of the trees or whatever's there now. If it turns out that the health of those trees takes another downturn. I guess beyond that, I'm also, so we go with the landscape stuff for now?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thank
I'll
you.
hold off the votes, but we can move on to the 10.
So what we did and what we're requesting is, because the construction is being done in phases, customers no longer have access to the sales/showroom/service areas. What the current operation is using the existing Pike House for sales and service for customers. So customers come and they keep the customers, in this area of the property so that they don't go back where the service bays are and they don't obviously go to this section because this is under construction. Utilization of the Pike House is what is proposed, and what is being requested is a placement of a temporary tent structure so that when clients come in for service, they know to pull into the tent, they get out of their car, they go into the Pike House, and then one of the employees at the facility take the car back to where the service bays are. It's strictly an operational temporary structure to help clients who have service know where to pull their cars. A lot of this industry now, you pull in the service bays, auto doors, they come in, you drop 3 or 4 cars off, people get out, they go to the service window, they request their stuff, then they go in, someone takes their car and drives away. It's essentially an effort to mimic that type of a service to help the clients identify where they're taking their car for service, and to also, if there is some rain, there is some snow, there is some weather, at least the town provides some sort of a structure on top for people getting out of their vehicles and being able to park it, leave it, and then come into the Pike House to schedule or discuss their plans. It is only temporary while they're using the Pike House for the operations during construction. It is not proposed to stay. It is not a proposed change to any of the existing permits. It's just an operational temporary tent that they're requesting to assist with customer service. So now what was explained to me, the contractor reached out to me. They said that they had requested a permit for the tent from the town's building department. And the town's building department said they didn't have the authority to give the tent because this project was being under a special permit. So that in order for us to be allowed to use the temporary tent, that we should go to the planning board to get the approval. So that is why we put this together and why we are here.
Mr. Ryder?
Thank you. I'm reading the memo from the building commissioner. And there's a couple of concerns, obviously, with the fire chief, with access around the facility, running vehicles in the tent, I'm sure will be a concern that he'll have. And the building commissioner states that it's not allowed under this. So I don't know why the building commissioner would say that it's under our authority if this is not going to be, I think it's really, as it being a temporary structure, it would fall to the building commissioner. I think as a part of the permit, if it was a permanent structure, yes, it would come back to this board, but as a permanent temporary structure, I think it would fall under the building commissioner and the fire department if they had issues, as if they were just putting up a temporary tent if there was no construction going on. It would still go back to the building commissioner for approval for a tent. I guess I would ask Dawn, who deals with this on a regular basis. You permit temporary tents for events
Correct.
of all time. So I think that would be the appropriate type of,
So, just one quick. So what happened when you went in and asked for the tent? What were you told?
Well, this is third party. I was explaining this from the contractor. When they went to get the permit, they said that they cannot issue a permit because of this special permit that this approved project is under, that if we were to have a tent on site, it would have to get the blessing of the committee.
So that sounds contradictory
to
from,
what the letter states. Under the building
counter
code,
then.
it's permitted by,
So I can't speak to it.
okay.
so this is what I'm going to suggest, rather than let's go get too deep in this.
Okay.
We've got 2 letters here, one from the building inspector, who I think says 2 different things, even in the letter a little bit.
It does.
You've gotten 2 different answers, one from the building inspector in this letter and one from the counter when you went in, not you, your project. as well as a letter now from the fire department with concerns. So rather than us do anything that either may or may not make this more complicated, I would suggest maybe going back into because this isn't something you're looking for now, this minute, right?
As soon as possible, right?
Well,
Absolutely.
I think as soon as possible is either going to be going back into the desk and seeing what the answer is at this point. You know, with these letters, as well as Dawn back at work.
Yes.
And see where you end up. In the event that somehow it gets determined that it really needs to be this board who makes a decision on this, then you come back in on, it's administrative action, so you can come back in on the 13th, and we could address it at that point. I don't see anything at this point where I'm confused by the third comment where it says, since it wasn't part of the special permit, that it's not a non-substantial change. Well, that would be the non-substantial change, would be allowing it. So that part I don't understand. Something doesn't have to have been in a special permit for us to say whether it is or isn't a non-substantial change. Sometimes someone asks for something because something comes up that they didn't know before. So that I don't know. The third comment I'm not concerned with, but I am concerned with, this seems to me, as Mr. Ryder pointed out, that this is the building inspector's, a temporary tent is not really something we would deal with. And the fire department has some concerns. So even if we were the ones dealing with this, we wouldn't deal with it now because the fire department still has concerns. So I think you're best off if you go back and try to resolve this matter with the building inspector first and see where you end up. I'm guessing that it will not be back here, though. I just don't think. So, well, I mean, you know, I guess that's how temporary is temporary, I guess is a different determination, but, you know, I think unless you were gonna ask for a permanent tent, I don't think it's us. So I think Mr. Ryder's correct on that one. Was there anything else, or were those are the only ones, right?
That was it.
All right, so then back to the landscaping.
Mr. Chairman, can I comment on the, on the tent? The fire department is questioning whether they can get access to the right side of the building with the tent in place. So I don't know if maybe it be a height restriction the tent has, or whether you can do something on a temporary basis to make it higher to allow the fire vehicles to get in there.
I mean, when it comes to the fire vehicle, I can move the tent and make sure there's a fire lane. You know what I mean? 'Cause it's a temporary structure. If we lose a parking spot or two, there, you know what I mean? There's value to that.
Right,
So.
I understand.
What is the date of the letter, just because I did not get a chance to see a comment?
I just told you to.
December 12th is one of them from the fire department. The other one is December 11th from the building commissioner.
Thank you.
And there's a subsequent comment by somebody from your staff on December 13th, Mr. Stephen Catani.
Okay?
So
Yeah,
he commented about, after receiving the letters, I believe, so maybe just a question of,
Yep.
you know, coordinating everyone's letters and statements and so forth and so on, so. But, I mean, I don't have a problem with the tents being in place temporarily, providing the fire department's okay with it and the building commissioner.
Thank you.
Okay, so to the landscaping revision requests. What is the pleasure of the board?
I make a motion to approve the non-substantial changes, but just take into effect that in the event we have issues with the landscaping, we'll bring you guys back in. All right, so.
Understood.
So my only, just for comment, or for discussion, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Is the specific, though, on the trees in the front, the three that are being asked to be removed, they may, one or three, or any number, depending on what happens with those other trees, in terms of going forward health-wise, that's, you know, for time and memoriam, not just next season. That's, you know, if it turns out that something needs to be put in there to replace what dies, those trees could come back into play. And the same thing on the back area and the right side, where you're moving them. So, you know, you're being allowed to move the ones on the right, remove the ones on the left and the back, but they may not be permanently off the table.
Understood. Yeah, so the way I'm figuring is the plan was approved with a certain number of trees, and at some point you have the ability to make sure that those number of trees are put somewhere on the property to make it compliant.
I'll second that. I just wanted to mention Anna's comments in regards to the evergreens, and those are per the requirements of the permit, that, you know, your evergreens are a minimum 8 feet, and then obviously shrubs and hedges 2 feet tall, with a spread of 18 inches as well on those. So those will be looked at as part of the final inspection.
All right. So a motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item B5, concept review, 495 Woburn Street, 40 Discovery Way.
Also, I just wanted to mention that, I'll look into the two for new business.
Ready?
Yep, if you state all your names for the record, the floor is yours. Just a reminder, whenever someone's speaking, just make sure the mic's near you so it gets picked up.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Robert Buckley, Reamer and Bronstein. To my right is Christine Hung from my office, an attorney working on the project. To my immediate left is Connor Nagel, a site civil engineer from VHB. And all the way to my left is John Hennessy, a representative of the developer. We're here this evening for 495 Woburn Road rear, as it's referred to, which is a piece of property that consists of about 109 acres. We're in the West Side Neighborhood Business Overlay District, which requires as a precondition to filing that we come here for a concept plan review. Our current schedule is to hopefully file mid-January for the various permits that are necessary for the redevelopment of this site. So we figured that we'd get in here as soon as possible. Since the fall, we've been having meetings with various representatives of the town to discuss particular issues, in particular the fire department, public safety. We will be filing with the Conservation Commission. What is very interesting about this site, if this were in law school or a development class, it has everything. Half of the property is in Tewksbury, half of the property is in Billerica, and we have impacts in Lowell. So we are proposing to construct a building of about 715,000 square feet. And literally, I would say that if you did a diagonal, again, half of the building would be in Tewksbury and half would be in Billerica. It's been a participatory process between the communities. We've been having a number of discussions. I'm going to have Mr. Nagel in a moment walk the board through the proposed site plan. We are in the process of completing our traffic study, which will be submitted as part of the application. We've articulated as an exhibit to the concept plan all of the various permits that we think we need, in addition to the special permit and certain waiver requests, because if you're familiar with the property, as Mr. Nagel will show you, that some of the issues that arise under your bylaw, given the logistics of having half the property or half the building in one jurisdiction, the other, make no sense. So we're going to try to move them around so that when we're done, it's a logical redevelopment of the site. The site is going to be a significant amount of investment in the property in terms of financial investment. There'll be opportunities for jobs. I know that one of the issues that has been discussed with representatives of the town is who the user would be. Clearly, when we file the special permit application, we will identify the user. At this time, we're under a confidentiality arrangement where we're not at liberty to discuss, but we will be there shortly. And I think that I would just like to say professionally, to your staff and to the staff of both communities, in fact, it's been a very informative and cooperative approach, and I hope we can work that way through the planning board process. As I told the staff when we kicked this project off back in the fall, when we had a meeting with both communities in this room, it's our job to get you the answers and your staff the answers. It's not your job to do our homework. So to the extent you have questions, we're going to do our best to answer those questions efficiently and hopefully satisfactorily. I've probably spoken enough. As I said, it's a very interesting site. I think when it is done, it will be a testament to the cooperative nature of both communities. But Connor, maybe if you'd walk the board through the plan.
Good evening. For the record, Connor Nagel with BHB. The project site, you're probably familiar with the site. It's the old Raytheon site just south of 495. It's actually in 3 communities. The northern part being in the city of Lowell, that is all wetland conservation area, so it's not part of the project. The project, as Mr. Buckley said, is almost equally divided into 2 pieces. This here is the town line between Billerica to the west and Tewksbury to the east along the Concord River. The commuter rail is the boundary of the eastern side, just off Woburn Street. The development footprint is about 42 acres of the 108 that form the whole parcel. The board on the right here is our proposed concept. As you can see, we're proposing to tear down the almost 450,000 square foot existing building to build this approximately 715,000 new building. Coming in across the bridge over the commuter rail is the entrance to the site. The employee parking would be proposed along the eastern side, a small amount of it here along the western side of the building also. But the balance of the parking on this side would be trailer parking with loading docks north and south of the building. All the green space you see along the perimeter here is pullback of the existing pavement adjacent to the river and wetlands that are northwest and south here. Stormwater would follow the state stormwater regulations. We are proposing to infiltrate under the pavement in several areas, still working through that with Raytheon's LSP, looking to get as much as we can under there, but there will be some limitations based on direction from them. Utilities for the project would all be served as the existing building is served, which all come from the east under the commuter rail from Woburn Street, served by Tewksbury. That's really all there is to the site plan, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or take your feedback as we try to develop the plans for a formal submittal.
Mr. Ryder.
Thank you. You answered one question that you can't answer the question.
We will. You know what? Theoretically, I can answer the question, but I'd have to have you sign a non-disclosure agreement. And by the time you finished reviewing that, we would have had it before the board anyhow. So.
I appreciate that. Obviously, I think this is a great thing for the town to get this back and bringing some potential jobs to the town. Obviously, some of the stormwater utilities from the town follow all the guidelines. I did read there was a few waivers.
Yeah, those are things, as I indicated, working with the town of Billerica to, for instance, on parking, rather than have the parking distributed in all of Billerica or partly in Billerica where it's not convenient, trying to make it work. And when we go through the site plan, you'll see our rationale for that. So under the zoning district that you're in, you're allowed to grant waivers, and we will justify all of the waivers that we're requesting. And I think that, well, at least I hope that when we do, you'll see that it makes for a better project.
Okay. You know, from what I see here, I don't have any other questions. Obviously, we'll see. I'm sure I will once we see the full packet come ahead.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Fratelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did review that site many, many years ago. And to this day, I'm like, how can a building like that and of that size be vacant for so many years and not be underwater or closed on or something? They've been carrying that building for a long, long time. Because we did look at it as a board a number of years ago as a potential site for developments, or anybody had any ideas what could go there, but never came to be. So, so for that, I'm all in favor of a nice commercial development down there. But reading through the plans, I'm like, there is not a hint of what they're trying to put in there. Now I understand, so, but, I did see the list of waivers, you know, which, I'm not a big fan of as far as some of the waivers, because before we can look at, even think about the waivers, we want to see what type of development's coming in, how the benefits to Tewksbury are going to be, and so forth and so on, with the jobs and the taxes and so forth. And then we can think about giving the waivers. And I always tell people, it's not just yourself, but other people coming in saying, why can't you develop a site without looking for waivers? It makes it that much easier for us as a board member, to okay the project if there's no waivers. But there's a major list of waivers here, so hopefully we'll be able to get the rationale behind that, so.
Through the chair, could I respond to that? I think that's a legitimate comment. I can't fault the fact that you have bylaws and you expect people to comply with them. I would submit, for the record, we have a very interesting site here, as Connor indicated, the property being in 3 jurisdictions and the building being actually in 2. And it's incumbent upon us, I think, when we file the final site plan, we have the traffic and we have site circulation, we have all the other supporting documentation, it's incumbent upon us to convince you that those waivers will make a better
Sure.
project. And I think we can do that.
Yeah. Looking at the plan, listening to Connor's presentation with trailers and so forth, so it's always going to be a tractor trailers coming in and out, so that'll be a concern of ours as a board for the traffic study, looking at it, and the effects that'll cause the Tewksbury residents. So, but I did see some of the signage things you're looking for, so we would need renderings for those, as you well know, and we also require numbering on the signs so that people driving by will know the address of the particular building. So the sign will go on Woburn Street, correct?
Yeah, again, through the chair, it would be critical here because the way the site is set up, you have Discovery Way, which is the entrance, which goes over the easement of the MBTA commuter rail line. So it's important for wayfinding to have that highly visible sign and
Sure.
make sure we have, I think was brought up earlier, with respect to sightline distances so that people don't drive by and have to loop around.
Sure, sure,
And
exactly.
one of the other things which Connor didn't indicate, but we are working with our abutting property owner to enhance the emergency access because we have a bridge that goes to both properties and we want to make sure the connections in the event.
Sure.
So
Great.
we just don't want to have traffic driving by and having to loop out.
Good. Again, it's a great asset to Tewksbury having some more commercial space there, and look forward to seeing the plans and going forward. So thank you very much for coming in. All set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. As this is not a congressional hearing, I'll make no attempt to quote the name that no one's discussing, so. But I think regardless of who it would be using it, I think the most important things on something of this size and taking into account that it's an interesting neighborhood in that it, much like your property, it's got a little bit of everything over there. But that includes something like this. I think the traffic study is going to be very important. I think you're lucky in that some of the bordering of the property is not bordering on things that we're going to have a huge issue with you screening but landscaping to a degree is going to be important, because again, we're getting a bigger building than was there before.
Right.
But obviously, you know, I'm in favor of a more modernized building than just trying to reuse something that's there if it's not going to work. So I don't have a problem with that, but again, aesthetically, we're putting in a much bigger, potentially putting in a much bigger property, we're going to need to account for that as best we can, especially if some waivers are granted that have to do with what can be seen from where. So take that into account when you're putting these things together. As Mr. Battaglia mentioned, renderings are really important to us. We want to be able to see a general idea as best as you can of what we're going to see and what others are going to see from different, you know, points of view, so that we have an understanding if we have residents come in and say, I'm going to be staring at, you know, a big blank wall. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. The renderings will help us determine exactly what we may think someone's seeing and what may need to be done to deal with that. As Mr. Battaglia brought up, I think signage is going to be very important here. And maybe not even just the signage right there, but maybe signage that you are able to come up with, you know, coming off of 495 that gives people the heads up as soon as possible of what they're looking for, because we do not want trailers trying to bang Uis through the neighborhood, because that's just not gonna work for anybody.
Yep.
So I think that's gonna be very important. As far as the waiver request, obviously, as Mr. Battaglia pointed out too, you know, we can't get into what we will or won't do on waivers, because you've yet to give us the full justification that we need to use to determine whether we'll grant them. However, and also, we've done this with the other projects, if you can show us sometimes that you can do something, but the reason you're asking for the waiver is because the way you want to do it is better, that's helpful as well. It's not just about whether or not the waiver is being asked for, it's also why. If the reason is, well, if we do it the way we're supposed to, this is why it's not as good. But if we do it the way we want to do it, even though we need a waiver, it's better. Make that argument, because it's helpful to us as well as any resident who's listening.
I picked that up during the last presentation, and frankly, Mr. Chairman, if you're saying all the things that for the last 4 months that we've been saying every week, we have, and my client can attest to this because they probably are looking at all the bills saying, how come there's so much work going into this? You do it right the first time.
Well, we have that with many of the people who come into the board. You know, the ones who are the most successful are the ones who do their work up front.
Right.
You know, it makes the hearings look like they're a little shorter than people think they're going to be, but that's because the i's have been dotted and the t's have been crossed. That's not a bad thing.
When we were sitting where you're sitting right now, back in October, when we said, oh, we're coming in shortly, when we got involved with planning the site, we suddenly realized that all the issues that the board has raised, we better have answers, and we better be able to justify those answers. And we also have layered on top of that, it's the two towns working together, which frankly, you know, I've done this for quite a number of years. It's quite rewarding to see the communities work together as well as they have. And I think when we're done, we will be able to answer all those questions, particularly the issue that you raised with respect to truck traffic. I think you'll hopefully be surprised at the frequency and on how we intend to handle it. So we're well aware.
And I think I would anticipate too, an absolute no-go coming in from the other direction on the trucks. They're not coming in from that end.
No.
You know what I mean, as far, through the neighborhood end, because we already have that trouble sometimes on our main street of
Right.
trucks using a road they're not really meant to be on. And again, to the waivers, some of those waivers you talk about, like the parking, it's not that you're actually asking for, and you may, I don't know, but it may not be that you're asking for a waiver in the number. It's that we're trying to split it up because you can't meet both Bill Ricker and our parking requirements, because that would double your number. So what you're really trying to do is just simply split the difference and say, okay, you require, I'm making up a number, 120, but we're gonna do 60 Tewksbury, waiver the other 60, you know, Bill Ricker, have them waive the other 60, and there you go. You know what I mean? So if,
You're
again,
absolutely-
that's
you're
an
right.
argument that's easy to make once
Yep.
you get to that point.
So 2:00 on Mondays, what do? You can participate on our call if you'd like.
If you want more billable hours, do you? That's fine.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of the requests that we're making are to address those types of issues, that when you try to take two sets of bylaws, two definitions, and try to make them work together and work in an efficient manner so that employees are safe and it's convenient and you don't have pedestrians walking all over the site. So you're absolutely right.
And I think too, and as you pointed out, you've got multiple communities involved here. Oddly enough, we have another project where we have a property and a building split. That one involves a town that will not be named. I have no problem naming Billerica or Lowell, but discussing this.
Let me see.
So, I mean, I hope that continues, that, the cooperation continues between the towns, as well as our boards, to whatever degree, we can. I can't imagine why this would not be a project we'd want to see move forward. So we, anticipate your bringing in the formal presentation and going from there.
Look forward to it.
All right?
And it's going to be a significant investment into the community, and once it's here, I think you'll see that it's going to stay here. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's either the first or the second in the country that this facility is being, so.
All right,
Excellent.
all right. Any other questions, comments?
Sure, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, so one building, correct?
Correct.
One question I had is hours. I mean, we're not going to be doing midnight trucks and stuff, right? So, I mean,
It'll be very.
Regular
very little-
hours?
Very little overnight. There may be 5 to 10 people in the building at night. We'll have all that information.
okay, great.
Could I ask one question, Mr. Chairman,
You may.
before we leave? Has nothing to do with the hearing. But we've been sitting out there trying to figure out, what are those two things behind you?
Time capsule.
Time capsules.
There you go. I was right.
Now you own dinner.
I was right.
Dinner or drinks?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
See you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to agenda item B6, A&R, 180, 184 South Street.
I'll give them a second.
Yeah, like I said, I'm just calling.
Great. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Oh, yeah. That's why I brought it up.
Sir, when you're all set, just state your name for the record, the floor is yours.
Good evening, my name is David Humphrey. I'm a land surveyor that works for DGT Associates. We prepared this A&R plan, and I had my money on either coffee urns or beer taps back there.
I like your second idea, but still time capsule, unfortunately.
I was wrong.
I'm not sure how these meetings would go if it was that, actually. For a while.
This A&R plan is looking to resolve a problem that was discovered when people went to sell and buy property. They found that occupation, including the house and part of the house and the garage, was on somebody else's land, and the neighbor who owned the property actually worked very well. The owner was at 184 South Street, and the property at 180 was onto his property. This area, I don't know, I imagine as a planning board, you've run into surveys done in this area. It's an extremely difficult area to survey. The plan was done in 1907 and has no dimensions and no monuments. So it's a challenge.
That doesn't pose any issue at all.
So I'm sure this is not a unique situation. And what we have here is where they're dividing the property to be conveyed to the two abutting properties, not creating any new building lots, but essentially resolving a property line.
All right. Mr. Vitale?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's the farthest I had in mind when he was coming in. I had the impression that the gentleman was donating some of this land to some of the abutters, to tell you the truth, but that's not the case, so.
I don't believe there's any donations going
Okay.
on.
So I have no problem with that. I'd like to get it resolved, but I guess that stuff happens over time, so, but no problem with what you are trying to do. Thank you.
Mr. Rada?
No problem at all. Understand, just cleaning up lot lines.
Yep, the easiest kind. I'm all set as well. So what is the pleasure of the board as to the A and R?
Making a motion to approve the A and R as written.
All right, motion to endorse the A and R as submitted. Do I have a second?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
sir.
And when can I pick up the plan? How does that work?
Next couple of days, you come to our office in community development.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Call first.
We'll let you know when
Of
it's
course.
ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That being said, all right, moving on to agenda item C, 120 Lumber Lane. It is the request of the applicant for this to be continued to our 113 meeting, and we have that one listed at 7:05. Do I have a motion to continue this to 7:05 on January 13th, 2020?
So moved.
All right, motion made, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to agenda item D, 1037 North Street et al. The applicant has requested this be continued to the January 13, 2020 meeting as well, and that will be to 7:10. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made, do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Excuse me, sorry. Moving on to agenda item E, Burt Road Development. Applicant has requested to be continued as well to the 13th at 7 PM. Do I have a motion to continue to 7 PM?
So moved.
All right, motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. And finally, agenda item F, 135 Pleasant Street. We're going to continue that to the 13th as well at 7:15. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made and seconded. Second?
Second, yes.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. That takes care of the hearings. That moves us to old business. Do we have any old business to discuss at this time? Seeing none, do we have any new business to discuss at this time? Also seeing none. Correspondence. Is this something you want to discuss, or is this
No,
just in there? Okay.
correspondence, yeah.
All right, so the only correspondence we have is on this,
The memo
rates.
from the
Rates.
town council.
all right, the town council, so that's fine. Everybody's got that, so they can take a look at it. Town planners report.
So I wanted to just mention that, Mr. Chair. For the Breakaway Ice Center at 23rd Street, they have removed the curb stops that were an issue in the past that were brought up. And so I'm just looking for feedback if that's, what's the put?
I don't understand why it's so hard to talk to these guys, because there's a couple of issues that they need to resolve. That's one, and that's fine. But we've already tried to explain to them that we'd be fine with allowing them to line a few more spaces in that area. Just not, putting the curb stops out or just having cars pick as many spots as they want to create. I've been up there numerous times. I'm there often enough that I can tell you that it would be reasonable to allow them to put in 6 more parking spaces, 3 and 3, at the end of that row. Then there should be a cap latticed section at the end to show where it ends. That way, if anybody parks beyond that, it should be dealt with, whether it's ticketed, towed, or whatever. But that it's clearly showing where that's supposed to end after those additional, but they're gonna have to come in so that we can
Yeah.
allow them to make that change. In addition, the section over in front of the building, some of it is maybe caused a little bit maybe by some of the old lines that they had in there. But the way it's going right now, it is a complete and utter disaster with the way people pull up to the front of the building. There's no indication of a way that should be best done. The building is here. They need to put in an arrow that shows people going, looping in. It used to have an island that just forced people to do it. People are coming in from every direction. Some of them are pulling in and parking in front of the building to unload and unload, going in different directions. It's a complete disaster. Where the handicap spaces end, what they really probably should do with those curb stops is use them to angle down towards the building to force, so people have no choice but to curve out that way. You know, if they're gonna use them for something, they can use them for that. But I don't want them to do it before we have a conversation.
Right, yeah.
They need to come in, we need to explain to them, or I'll go there and I'll walk it with them and explain it to them. If they'll just provide somebody for me to talk to
Yeah, no.
explain to them what the problem is and how we want it resolved.
Yeah, so I've been able to get a hold of David, who's a Breakaway Ice Center,
Yeah.
and so he's been taking over a lot of these responsibilities because he's a tenant. So he's willing to come in and discuss this.
He could come in, and I can also go out there afterwards and walk it and explain exactly what I'm talking about, or we're talking about.
During the daylight though, right? Yeah.
But, you know, I sit there, I've taken pictures, I have them on my phone still, of the just insanity of what goes on in those parking, and then in that other section, where people just make up another, 10 or 12 spaces in that area with, if the curb stops aren't there. At least if they line it and cap it, it's clear where the end is. And anybody who goes beyond that, they take their own chances of what happens, because it's been made very clear. Right now, they've got a cone or two out there in that area. It's working a little bit, but you can see it's getting knocked over, and I have a feeling that the cone is migrating a little bit to the left when a new space is needed. So it's not, obviously it's not as deterrent as the curb stops, but the curb stops make no sense because that wasn't what we asked for anyways. So that, 6.5 does, I understand a need for a few more spaces there. I can see where that would make sense. 6 is probably about the limit, and then they need to cap that end of that row to show where it ends, and that's it. But we can discuss
I
that.
think to, as one of the stipulations for that to happen, they should bring in a painting plan. Whatever company they're going to use to mark those spots, we'll put together a very simple CAD drawing with a plan that we can see and approve, and that can help,
Well,
make
I
them
think-
understand that.
I think part of what the problem with this is that all of this discussion that we had, and a lot of what they actually did to the parking lot, was all connected up to a special permit that doesn't even exist anymore, because it went too long without them dealing with it. Really, what we're talking about now is they're asking for a bond release that we're holding up until we can get some sort of resolution to their parking, even if we treated it like the old parking.
Right, and I think one thing to make that happen is having a striping plan on file as part of the special permit that no longer exists, or whatever it may be, as part of the release of bond.
And that's fine. Like,
I
we have,
think that
we
would-
have the one they drew up that they did, and they did do that
But
the way
maybe
we asked. It's just, it's not, in practice, it's not working right. So, but, at this point, I think they need a little bit more on there, and I think, and then if
some
they could come in and
arrows
then-
help, some
Right,
signage,
exactly.
something
I
that
think,
moves the flow of traffic
It's-
properly through the parking lot.
and so much of the season is spent in inclement weather, where you can't necessarily see everything on the ground anyways, and you don't need people coming from 4 different directions, in the middle of
Mr.
the
Chairman,
front of the building.
unfortunately, right, this is the prime season for hockey, you know that, high school hockey, so junior hockey and so forth. And it's unfortunate that they couldn't get this done over the summertime.
Right.
Striping get done, everything get done.
Which is- yeah.
But they haven't made an effort to really come in and see us to get this issue resolved. It's been all through email and none of that. And, I don't know if there's any other outstanding permits. Are there any outstanding other permits that are there, Don? I
The
mean,
only other board I think that has anything with them is the Board of Health, but that's their own.
We have
That's what I'm saying,
annual
yeah.
inspections.
Right.
But those were conducted, I think, in September.
I had heard that there was some work done there, new boards were put in, I guess, because the boards last year were a real safety hazard. So speaking to one of the coaches, they've done that, new ice surface, I believe, as well. So they have done some improvements, and unfortunately, if they had gotten in before here, they'd have this all striped and done before the season here, because it's right now, it's here, so in not good weather, so.
True.
So,
Anyone else?
Yeah, just to add that, David Hughes is someone who's not the property owner, so is who I could get a hold of. The property owner who had done the initial bond release has become unresponsive to the several emails and communications I've sent out to him, so I just want to make you aware of that. So we haven't had a renewed request of the bond release, but working on these issues.
That's fine. I mean, it's on them to want that bond back, so.
Yeah, so,
This is not new to you, by the way. There's at least 3 levels of ownership, I believe, for that, and that's part of the problem. There's the ultimate
Right.
owner, then there's one more there, and then there's the one who's sort of on-site. And I think that's the problem. David's the one that's on-site
yes,
and actually
exactly.
manages the building, but we'll do the best we can.
Okay,
All right.
so I'll see if he can come in for the January 13th meeting.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No,
All right, did you have the other two? You're just working on those other two, you said, right?
yeah,
Perfect. That's fine.
actually, Mr. Chair, I want to ask about the, well, the Walgreens
All right.
dead plantings, if I could just get a little more details before I investigate that, because it is winter time. So I know it's mentioned by Mr. Fratelli at the.
I had thought that the plantings were dying or have already died over the summer months and no longer there for the purpose of providing some type of coverage and so forth, but obviously they can't do anything now. It's December 16th, so, but
Now, I'm sorry, did we get any comments from the neighbors who had originally had the issue? Have they commented again that it's not
that
sufficient?
was a lighting issue,
That on
wasn't
the
it?
lighting?
That was the lighting? Okay. I thought it was about the headlights. They were concerned, that's why the plantings went in.
Yeah, I haven't, since that, I think it was in April, that meeting, I haven't received an update on that. So I'll look into all those
So
matters.
why don't we do this? Because obviously nothing's happening in the winter. Why don't we just put a pin in it
Okay,
to take a look at it in the spring? Or, as the spring's, right, to bring it back up in March, we'll take a look, see how it survived the winter. Either way, because even if they were okay, but the winter killed them, then we would have brought this up anyway. So we might as well do that in March and see where the landscaping stands.
and then the petrol station on Main Street, near Shoshine, on the other side near, 495.
Yep.
Mr. Fowler had mentioned there's a no-turn sign. There's a missing no-turn
Okay.
sign. And so I'm going to investigate
Okay.
that, if that was part of the special permit.
Okay, yeah, I don't remember that one. I just knew the one on the corner of Shawshene and 38 was the one, and that's been relined, so that's
Yes.
perfect. Whether people abide by it, I don't know, but at least it's there for everybody to see, and it's clear that they're not supposed to come out of there and try and take a left onto 38 across 2 lanes of traffic.
Yeah, Mr. Follett said the one by Assel Street is the same problem.
Yeah, so,
So it's
All right,
a
that's
lining issue.
Lining sign.
Okay.
I mean, I don't remember doing that one, so I don't know what was asked for. I just know that on the one that
Yeah,
you did
on
work on for me,
Shawshene.
that had the arrows showing only in, straight
probably
and
went off
turn,
the-
Yeah.
nothing going out.
Right, and that's been resolved.
And that's been repainted, so that's
After.
perfect.
Okay.
So that might be.
All right, so I'll look into that for painting and this.
All right.
Make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
But just before we adjourn, like it's our last meeting for the year.
All right.
Wish everyone a happy holiday season, Merry Christmas. And we will see everybody in the new year.
You as well.
Get back at it.
Great.
So I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
All those opposed, motion carries. Good evening.